It's time to make chocolate almond biscotti, which is a popular cookie in this house because biscotti never go stale and they're great for dipping in tea or coffee or even hot cocoa. Now, as I mentioned, we're making chocolate biscotti with almonds. Now, this recipe actually calls for hazelnuts, but you can substitute whatever nuts you want, and I love almonds. So here I have 1.25 cups of almonds, and they've been lightly toasted because the cookies actually won't get hot enough as they bake for the nuts to toast in the cookies, so you have to toast them ahead of time. So I'm gonna add most of the nuts, about 1 cup of the nuts, to the food processor. This is a food processor cookie, which I love. And we're gonna put the lid on. Now we're just gonna pulse this about 8 times. You want big chunks of almonds so that when you slice the biscotti, you see the almonds. All right, that's pretty good. You see you have some coarsely ground nuts. There's a variety of textures in there, and that's completely fine. So now we're gonna grind the remaining 1/4 cup of nuts. It takes about 45 seconds. All right, that looks pretty good. They're nice and finely ground. Time to add the remaining dry ingredients right to the food processor. So we're gonna add 1 1/4 cups all-purpose flour, and this is unbleached flour. You wanna stay away from the bleached flour if you can. It doesn't have as much flavor, and also it has less protein. And in this cookie, having enough protein will ensure that the cookies stay together. Right now for the cocoa, you want 1/2 cup of cocoa. Now you can buy Dutch processed cocoa or natural, and both will work fine in this recipe. I prefer the dark or the Dutch processed cocoa because I like the darker color and I think it has more flavor. Next up, some baking powder. I want 2 teaspoons of that. And now for some instant espresso powder. We're gonna add 1 teaspoon of that. And this is a good thing to just have in your pantry. Add a little bit whenever you're making anything with chocolate. And it just makes things taste more chocolatey. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. All right, table salt right in the food processor. All right, we're gonna let this rip about 15 seconds till it's nice and combined. Into a nice big bowl this goes. Oh, that's the smell of cookies right there. Get it out of the corners of the food processor. That's where all the finely ground nuts seem to hide, right in the corners. All right, no need to wash this bowl, but we are gonna put the eggs back in the food processor. And this is what I think is so cool. Instead of whipping the eggs using a stand mixer or a hand beater, we're gonna use the food processor. And by whipping the eggs, you just add a little bit more air into the dough. All right, so 2 large eggs, crack them right into the food processor. Okay, we're gonna turn this on, let it go for about 3 minutes until the eggs have doubled in size and they look foamy. You can see those eggs have changed in color. They're light, they're very foamy. Now we're gonna add 1 cup of sugar. Now I'm gonna add it through the feed tube while the processor is running. And to help it all make it into the processor, I'm gonna use a funnel. Next up, 4 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter and just a little bit of vanilla, about 1/2 teaspoon. You just wanna process this until it's combined in about 10 seconds. All right, that's it for the liquid ingredients. Oh, nice and fluffy and well combined. Now this is gonna go into a separate bowl from the dry ingredients. Into a bowl it goes. Again, scraping the corners, getting all of it out. All right, so to combine these ingredients, we're gonna add 1/2 of the flour mixture over the eggs. This dough is pretty dry, so we're adding the flour in stages just to make it easier to mix. I'm gonna fold this together. All right, so now the remaining flour goes in. Again, just sprinkling it over the top. And all these nicely chopped nuts. And as I mentioned, this is a very stiff dough, so take your time, make sure everything's all combined and there's no floury pockets anywhere. All right, I said this was a stiff dough and I was not kidding. You really want to push it around the bowl, make sure there's no floury bits. That looks pretty good. Kind of has the consistency of Play-Doh, which is perfect because we have a lot of molding to do. In fact, I made some templates. So here I have a piece of parchment paper on a rimmed baking sheet. You notice on one sheet of the parchment, in pencil, I drew some rectangles. They're about 3 inches wide and 8 inches long, 2 of them. And I'm gonna flip the parchment over and I'm gonna put the dough on the non-pencil side, so no one has to eat any lead or charcoal. And what we're going to do is use these to press the dough out into logs that will then bake before we slice and bake again, because biscotti are twice baked cookies. So to make the logs, we're going to take this dough, divide it into 2 pieces, roughly even size. So the recipe says floured hands, which works well. I also think wet hands is nice to help just press the dough out to form the rectangles. I have to say, shaping these rectangles, it's not just for looks, because these cookies, they have to be twice baked and they're very dense on the inside. And to get them to dry out and have the proper texture, you need to have an even log going into the oven. Those are getting close to the right shape. Now here's a trick. It's actually in the recipe and it works like a charm. Take a spatula, you want to spray it really quickly with veg oil spray, and then we're going to use it to help smooth out the top and the sides so you have a nice flat level log of cookie dough. Now this is time really well spent, because not only will you ensure that these bake at the same rate, but you're compacting the dough a little bit so they won't crumble apart as much when you slice them. That looks nearly darn perfect. One last step before they go into the oven, and that is an egg wash on the top. Just adds a nice sheen to it. Again, helps the cookies hold together. So I'm going to separate an egg here. We just want the white. Save that yolk for something else. And we're going to add a pinch of salt. Now, the salt really isn't for flavor. It's simply to help break up and denature the egg whites so they brush on more smoothly. Oh, that looks perfect. Using a pastry brush, we're just going to brush the top. All right, these are ready for the oven. They take about half an hour or so in a moderate oven, 325 degrees, and you know they're done when they're puffed and they have that crackly look on the top. Once the biscotti loaves are nicely baked, you got to let them cool for about 30 minutes before slicing them on a slight bias into 1/2-inch thick slices. Then those slices go on a wire rack and they go back into the 325-degree oven to dry out, and that takes about another 30 minutes. And then you gotta let them sit on the counter and cool for at least an hour. These biscotti are ready to eat. And the one thing I like to do before I eat biscotti is break it and see how hard it is. Oh, it's perfect. Has a little bit of give, but it's not gonna be a tooth breaker. And it's a dunker. Oh, and a nice fresh cup of coffee. That chocolatiness has that cocoa-y flavor. It's not a rich chocolate flavor, it's more of a lean cocoa flavor, and I love it with those lightly toasted almonds. It is the perfect afternoon cookie. See you next time. Thanks for watching. What'd you think? Leave a comment below and let me know what you're excited to cook this week. You can get today's recipes and more for free at our website.